Canada is now confronting a defining moment in its democratic journey, one that could shape the nation's political future for years to come. What we're witnessing isn't just a shift in leadership or a minor political controversy, it is a profound unraveling of public trust and institutional credibility. At the center of this turmoil stands Mark Carney, a man once portrayed as the ideal leader for a fractured Liberal Party. Hailed as a financial expert and a global statesman, Carney entered the political arena with the backing of party insiders and the glowing endorsements of legacy media. He was meant to be the image of stability, a polished and articulate figure who would restore the Liberal brand after years of stagnation and electoral decline. Yet, the reality has turned out to be far messier than the narrative that brought him to power. The 2025 federal election, the event that was supposed to mark a new era under Carney's leadership, has instead plunged Canada into a legitimacy crisis. What took place in the aftermath of the election was not simply routine housekeeping or bureaucratic oversight, it was a stunning, far-reaching exposure of systemic failures that have undermined the very foundations of the democratic process in this country. What emerged from the courtroom was nothing short of shocking: evidence of widespread voting irregularities, procedural inconsistencies, and troubling anomalies that have cast doubt over the outcome of the election itself. Rather than securing power through a clean and transparent contest, Carney's Liberals squeaked by with paper-thin victories in a handful of crucial ridings, many of which were later found to be tainted by questionable mail-in ballots, suspicious last-minute flips, and vote tallies that simply don't add up. Even Elections Canada, an institution long regarded as impartial and above reproach, was forced to acknowledge these irregularities, unable to dismiss or conceal the mounting discrepancies. This wasn't business as usual, it was a warning bell ringing across the nation. With federal courts now stepping in to examine the failures in detail, the repercussions are growing by the day. Judicial recounts have flipped key ridings, while legal experts openly debate whether the entire election may need to be redone. The public response has been swift and impassioned. Canadians from coast to coast are raising their voices not out of partisan loyalty, but because they sense something deeply wrong has occurred. They care not just about which party holds power, but about the legitimacy of that power. They care about accountability, integrity, and the preservation of democratic norms that have long defined the Canadian political experience. These concerns go far beyond political tribalism. This is not about supporting the left or the right. It's about whether citizens can trust that their votes were counted fairly and accurately. When elections are conducted in a manner that leaves room for doubt, when mail-in ballots appear out of nowhere, when the number of votes cast exceeds the number of registered voters in certain ridings, and when procedural chaos overwhelms transparency, the very soul of democracy is thrown into question. Mark Carney, who was never directly elected as leader by Canadians, finds himself accused of being installed rather than chosen, ushered into power by a clique of party operatives desperate to salvage their crumbling influence. The result? Far from providing the calm and competent leadership promised, Carney has presided over a government that now seems paralyzed by scandal and indecision. Ridings like Windsor, once reliable Liberal territories, have slipped into Conservative hands. Halton Hills has come under official scrutiny for alarming voting discrepancies. In Montreal, legal proceedings are underway to determine the chain of custody failures with advanced ballots. Perhaps most damning of all is the case in Vancouver South, where the total number of ballots submitted reportedly exceeded the number of registered voters, a statistical impossibility that has shaken public confidence to its core. Yet through it all, Carney has remained notably absent from the public eye, choosing instead to shield himself behind institutions now under siege. He has offered little in the way of explanation or accountability, opting instead for silence and bureaucratic deflection. In stark contrast, Pierre has seized the moment to amplify his voice, presenting himself as a champion of the people and a defender of democratic integrity. He has been visible, outspoken, and unflinching in his criticism, labeling the 2025 election a disastrous failure of administration that betrayed the trust of Canadians. His message has found fertile ground. The frustration being expressed across the country is not coming from fringe movements or conspiracy theorists. It's coming from everyday voters who believe they've been deceived, who feel the weight of a broken system pressing down on them. The issues unearthed so far cannot be dismissed as isolated incidents or minor paperwork errors. In places like Halifax and Quebec, entire sets of ballots were reportedly delivered to the wrong locations. Postal codes were mismatched. Advanced ballots were either lost or arrived with missing identification marks. These aren't simple mistakes, they point to a breakdown in national election infrastructure that demands serious reckoning. The most jarring development yet, however, is the federal court's decision to void Carney's own seat. The man who was expected to lead with authority and credibility is now without a parliamentary seat, raising the question of how a prime minister can govern without a confirmed mandate from his own riding. The Liberal Party, meanwhile, is reeling from the fallout. Internal divisions are surfacing. Leaks from within the caucus suggest rising tensions and disillusionment. Members of Parliament, especially those in marginal ridings, are facing backlash from constituents and privately questioning whether backing Carney was a mistake of epic proportions. And rightly so. Carney's ascent to the top wasn't the result of a populist groundswell. It was a carefully orchestrated maneuver by the political elite, designed to project competence while avoiding the messiness of open leadership contests. But now, that very strategy has backfired, leaving the party leaderless, rudderless, and increasingly illegitimate in the eyes of the public. Elections Canada has also seen its reputation battered. Officials continue to insist that most problems were minor, but their reassurances ring hollow in the face of overwhelming evidence to the contrary. For voters who went to the polls in good faith, only to learn that their ridings were mishandled, that ballots were miscounted, or that outcomes were determined by margins of just a few questionable votes, the feeling isn't confusion, it's betrayal. This isn't just an administrative error. It's a democratic emergency. Legal scholars are debating the next steps. Public pressure on the Governor-General is intensifying. Town halls are being filled with angry citizens demanding accountability. MPs are receiving a flood of calls and emails from voters who refuse to accept what now looks like a deeply flawed election. What was once framed as a routine transition of power has become a moment of national reckoning. Mark Carney was supposed to be the mature leader Canada needed during uncertain times. Instead, he has become a symbol of inaction, opacity, and political overreach. His leadership is now in tatters, his mandate effectively collapsed, and his moral authority rapidly eroding. What remains is a fundamental question that Canadians are increasingly asking: was this all the result of gross incompetence, or was there something more deliberate at play? As recounts continue and courts deliberate, one fact remains indisputable: Canada's faith in its electoral system has been profoundly shaken. And if democracy is to survive and thrive, that faith must be restored, not through platitudes or spin, but through transparency, accountability, and action. The country cannot afford to look away. This isn't just a procedural battle or a partisan squabble. This is about whether the voice of the people still matters in the land they call home. The old order has been exposed. The status quo is no longer acceptable. And Canadians are no longer content to sit quietly as their democracy is bent, bruised, and potentially broken.